What if not every believer enters heaven? What if there is a list, and it is almost full? 144,000. That is the number. Not more, not less. And for 2,000 years it has disturbed people. It has split churches. It has turned families against each other. It has given birth to movements that have shaped the lives of millions. And perhaps the strangest thing about it is this: almost everyone has heard of it, but if you ask most people what the text actually says, they do not know. They repeat what they were told. They repeat what their pastor said, what their denomination taught, what someone once declared with great confidence somewhere. But if they were to sit down and open the book of Revelation and read what is actually written there, they would be surprised, because what many people teach about this number is simply not in the text, at least not in the way they think. Tonight, we are going to do something unusual. We are not going to start with an answer. We are going to start with the text itself. We are going to read it slowly, carefully, the way you would read a letter that has been waiting for you for 2,000 years. We are going to look at the number, the context, the history, the symbols, and the surprisingly different ways this passage has been understood across the centuries. And by the end, you may find that the question itself has changed shape in your hands, that what you thought was a question about a number has become a question about who you are and what you are willing to stand for. Close your eyes. Let your breathing slow. There is no rush here. The number has waited 2,000 years. It can wait a few more minutes while you settle into the quiet. Breathe. Before we look at the text, it is important to understand something about the kind of book we are opening. The book of Revelation is not like any other book in the Bible. It is not a gospel narrative. It is not a letter from Paul. It is not a historical chronicle. It is not a collection of laws or proverbs. It belongs to a genre called apocalyptic literature. And if you do not understand what that genre is, you will almost certainly misread whatever you find inside it. Apocalyptic literature was a well-established form of writing in the ancient Jewish and early Christian world. The word apocalypse does not mean disaster or catastrophe as we have come to use it today. It means unveiling, a pulling back of the curtain to reveal what is hidden behind the visible world. Daniel's book is apocalyptic. The book of Enoch is apocalyptic. The testaments of the 12 patriarchs are apocalyptic. John did not invent this form. He inherited it. And the form has rules. Apocalyptic literature works with symbols, images, numbers, animals, colors that carry not mathematical or literal meanings, but theological ones. A beast with 7 heads is not a zoological observation. It is a representation of an empire. A number like 12 is not a quantity. It is a quality, the quality of completeness, of divine order. A color like scarlet is not an aesthetic preference. It is a message about blood, about power, about the cost of empire. Anyone who reads this kind of text the way they would read a modern news article will misread it, not because they lack intelligence, but because they are applying the wrong lens to the wrong kind of material. Reading the Revelation literally is like reading a political cartoon literally. You will see the drawing, but you will miss the point. This matters enormously for the 144,000, because if the number is read mathematically, as a precise head count, it yields one kind of meaning. But if it is read symbolically, As a theological statement about the completeness of God's people, it yields an entirely different one. And the entire history of interpretation has been shaped by which lens the reader brings to the text. Let us begin with the text itself. The number 144,000 appears in the book of Revelation exactly twice. Not once, not 3 times, twice. In 2 different chapters, in 2 different scenes, with 2 different sets of details. And this is where the confusion begins, because most teachings treat it as though it were a single, straightforward statement. One passage, one meaning, one interpretation. It is not. The 2 appearances are so different from each other that they raised questions even among the earliest readers of the text. The first appearance is in the 7th chapter. The scene is dramatic, cosmic in scale. 4 angels stand at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the winds. The winds here are not weather. They are forces of destruction, forces of judgment. The angels are restraining them, holding back the consequences, delaying the reckoning until something has been completed. A 5th angel arrives from the east. He carries the seal of the living God, and he calls out to the other 4, "Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God." And then the number is given, 144,000. From all the tribes of Israel, 12,000 from each of 12 tribes. The text lists the tribes by name, and here is the first surprise. The list does not match the list you know from the Old Testament. The tribe of Dan is missing entirely, simply absent as though it had been forgotten. In its place, both Joseph and Manasseh appear, which is strange because Manasseh was Joseph's son. Normally, the tribe of Joseph would include Manasseh. The substitution is not an error, it is deliberate. But why? We will return to that question. It leads somewhere important. The second appearance is in the 14th chapter, and here everything is different. The atmosphere is different. The setting is different. The description is different. The Lamb stands on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000. But this time, they do not bear a seal on their foreheads. They bear the name of the Father. The text says they are virgins, that they did not defile themselves with women, that no lie was found in their mouths, that they are blameless, and they sing a new song that no one else can learn. 2 descriptions, 2 scenes, the same number, but the same group, or 2 different groups. At this question, everything you have ever been taught about this topic begins to diverge, and the real story begins. Breathe. To understand why this passage is so complex, we need to go back to where the text was born, because the book of Revelation was not written in the 21st century. It does not operate by the logic we are accustomed to. It is not a scientific treatise. It is not a historical chronicle. It is not a prophetic timetable. It is written in a very specific genre, a genre that had its own rules in the ancient world, a genre that, if you do not understand it, you will misread no matter what you think about the content. That genre is called apocalyptic literature. Sometime between the years 90 and 96 of the Common Era, during one of the most brutal periods of the Roman Empire, a man named John sits on the island of Patmos, a small, barren, rocky place in the Aegean Sea, barely larger than a medium-sized village. He is there because the empire has exiled him. Rome does not tolerate those who refuse to worship the emperor as a god, and John is one of those who refuses. The emperor at this time is Domitian. He is not like Nero, who was impulsive, cruel, but unsystematic in his persecution. Domitian is methodical. He does not merely want political power, he demands divine worship. He uses the title Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. This is not an empty phrase, it has consequences. Anyone who refuses to offer incense at the emperor's statue is not merely a lawbreaker, they are an enemy of the order of the empire itself. To understand what this meant in daily life, you need to understand the structure of the Roman provincial economy. It was not an economy of free markets and independent businesses as we might imagine today. It was an economy woven through with religious obligation at every level. The trade guilds, the equivalent of modern professional associations, were the backbone of economic life. If you were a metal worker, you belonged to the Metalworkers Guild. If you were a dyer of cloth, you belonged to the Dyers Guild. If you were a baker, you belonged to the Bakers Guild. And each guild had its patron deity, its regular feasts, its religious ceremonies. These ceremonies were not optional. They were the price of membership. And membership was the price of being able to work. If you did not belong to the guild, you could not practice your trade. If you could not practice your trade, you could not earn. If you could not earn, your family did not eat. The guild feasts typically included a meal that had been sacrificed to the guild's patron god, often including the emperor, who was increasingly being treated as divine. There would be a libation, a formal pouring out of wine as an offering. There would be prayers and rituals that acknowledged the emperor's divine status, and every member was expected to participate. If you were a Christian, this created an impossible dilemma. Your faith told you that there was only one God, and that offering worship to any other, including the emperor, was idolatry. But your economic reality told you that if you refused to participate, you would be expelled from the guild. And expulsion from the guild meant economic death, not just for you, for your wife, for your children, for everyone who depended on you. Imagine this concretely. You are a potter in the city of Thyatira. You make lamps, bowls, storage jars. You have done this work your whole life. Your father did it before you. You are good at it. Your family depends on it. And every month the guild holds a feast. Wine is poured for the emperor. Prayers are offered to the patron gods. Meat that has been sacrificed in a pagan temple is served at the table. If you eat, you participate. If you participate, you are acknowledging, in the eyes of your community and in the eyes of God, that the emperor has a claim on your worship. If you refuse, you are noticed. If you are noticed, you are reported. If you are reported, you are expelled. If you are expelled, your kiln goes cold, your shelves go empty, your children ask why there is no bread. This is not an abstract theological problem. This is the question of whether your children eat tonight. And every day you make the choice again. Every single day. The pressure does not let up. The system does not take a day off. The compromise is always right there, within reach, waiting to be made. In the 7 letters that John writes to the churches of Asia Minor at the beginning of Revelation, this tension is the central theme. In Pergamum, the text calls the city the place where Satan has his throne. Why?
because Pergamum housed the largest imperial cult center in the entire province of Asia. The great altar of Zeus, one of the most impressive religious structures in the ancient world, dominated the city skyline. The temple to Augustus was the provincial center for emperor worship. The pressure was not subtle. It was architectural. It was built into the very landscape of the city, towering over everything, impossible to ignore.
In Thyatira, the problem is a woman the text calls Jezebel, who teaches that it is acceptable to participate in pagan feasts. Her solution is compromise. Be Christian on the inside, but conform on the outside. Eat the meat, pour the wine, say the words, and then go home and pray to the real God in private. Nobody gets hurt. Everyone survives. The children are fed. It is a reasonable position. It is a practical position, and the text condemns it. Not because the text is heartless, but because the text understands that certain compromises, once made, cannot be unmade. Once you have bowed, it becomes easier to bow again, and again, and again, until the bowing is no longer a compromise, but a habit. And the habit is no longer noticed, and the person you were before the first bow is gone, replaced by someone who bows automatically, reflexively, without even realizing they are doing it. And this is the question that echoes across millennia. When is adaptation wisdom, and when is it betrayal? Where is the line between survival and capitulation? At what point does the system begin making your decisions for you? The seal is for those who found that line, who drew it, not because they knew they would win, but because they could not have lived with themselves if they had not drawn it. This is the world in which the number 144,000 was first spoken, not as an abstract theological concept, as a lifeline thrown to people who were drowning in the daily pressure of an empire that demanded everything, including their souls. Breathe. Now let us talk about the number itself, because the number is not random. It is anything but random. 12 times 12,000. The number 12 in the biblical tradition is the number of completeness, of order, of divine governance. 12 tribes form Israel. 12 apostles are chosen by Jesus. 12 gates stand in the New Jerusalem. 12 foundations support its walls. 12 kinds of fruit grow on the tree of life. The number 12 is not a quantity in the Hebrew way of thinking. It is an expression of fullness. And the number 1,000, and this is crucial, in ancient Hebrew literature, 1,000 is not a precise measurement. This is very important because modern readers automatically interpret numbers mathematically. But the biblical writers did not think this way. When the psalmist says that God keeps his covenant for 1,000 generations, he does not mean exactly 1,000 generations. When we read that the cattle on 1,000 hills belong to the Lord, the text is not counting hills. In Hebrew usage, 1,000 means very many, so many that it is not worth counting, fullness itself. So if we put it together, 12 times 12,000, the result may be the fullness of fullness, the symbolic number for the complete people of God. Not a limitation, but paradoxically, an expression of totality. Not a statement that says this many and no more, but a statement that says perfectly, completely, without remainder, everyone who belongs. No one is missing. No one is accidentally left out.
And here we should return to the question of the missing tribe, Dan. Of the 12 tribes listed in chapter 7, Dan is absent, simply not there. Its place has been taken by Manasseh, creating an unusual duplication with Joseph. This absence has generated centuries of speculation. Irenaeus, the 2nd century theologian, believed that the Antichrist would come from the tribe of Dan. His reasoning was rooted in Old Testament tradition. The tribe of Dan had been associated with idolatry from its earliest history. When Jeroboam split the kingdom and set up golden calves for the northern tribes to worship, one of those calves was placed in the territory of Dan. The association between Dan and apostasy was thus ancient and well established. But other scholars see the absence differently. Some argue that it is simply a structural choice. The author needed 12 names, and the specific identities were less important than the number itself. What mattered was the completeness of the list, not the particular names on it. 12 meant all, full, whole. Not a single tribe omitted from the covenant. The truth is, we do not know for certain why Dan is missing. The text does not explain. It simply presents the list without the name. And this uncertainty is itself instructive, because it reminds us that the text does not answer every question we bring to it. Some things are left open. Some gaps are left unfilled. And the honest reader must be willing to sit with the gap, to hold the question without forcing it into an answer that the text itself does not provide. This capacity, the capacity to sit with uncertainty, to hold an open question, to resist the urge to close every gap with a confident declaration, is itself a spiritual discipline. And it is one that the book of Revelation seems to demand of its readers at every turn. The text is not a catechism, it is a vision, and visions, by their nature, contain elements that resist precise definition. But here is where the conflict begins. Because this interpretation directly contradicts what certain religious groups teach, and at this point, the story becomes charged with real tension, because we are no longer talking about ancient texts. We are talking about the faith, identity, and community of living people. The Jehovah's Witnesses interpret the number literally. Their teaching holds that exactly 144,000 individuals will rule with Christ in heaven. They are the little flock, the chosen ones. Everyone else, those they call the other sheep, will live in an earthly paradise, but not in heaven. They do not receive the same reward. The Seventh-day Adventists approach from a different direction. They identify the 144,000 with the final generation of believers, those who will live through the last great tribulation, who distinguish themselves by keeping the Sabbath, and who will not bow even in the final test. Certain Pentecostal and charismatic communities offer yet another reading. For them, the 144,000 are a spiritual elite, believers with a special anointing who will lead the last great revival and prepare the way for Christ's return. Reformed and Catholic theology largely reads the number symbolically. The 144,000 is not a specific group. It is not a literal count. It is the entire people of God represented symbolically. The number itself expresses completeness, not restriction. The same text, the same sentences, the same words, and at least 4 radically contradictory interpretations, each one held with conviction. each one finding evidence in the text, each one able to explain why the others are wrong. This is not because the text is poorly written or confusing. It is because apocalyptic literature is intentionally multi-layered. It does not intend to be a precise timetable like a railway schedule. It intends to be a theological mirror. What you see in it reveals at least as much about you and your community as it does about the text itself. And it is worth knowing that the literal interpretation, which many people today take for granted as the obvious biblical reading, only became dominant in the 19th century. For most of Christian history, the Revelation was read differently. Victorinus, who lived in the late 3rd century and whose commentary on Revelation is the oldest surviving Latin interpretation of the Apocalypse, did not read the 144,000 as a literal number. He understood it as representing the church as a whole, and he identified the word virgins with the purity of faith, not with sexual abstinence.
Tychonius, the 4th century Donatist theologian who profoundly influenced Augustine, developed 7 rules for interpreting the Bible. One of his rules stated that what the Bible says about Israel often applies to the church and vice versa. This hermeneutical principle laid the groundwork for the interpretation that identifies the 12 tribes with the 12 apostles, and the 144,000 with the entire Christian community. Andrew of Caesarea, who in the 5th century wrote the first complete Greek commentary on Revelation, also read the number symbolically. For him, 12 times 12,000 was the perfect number, representing God's complete people, not as a limitation, but as a totality. Origen, one of the most brilliant minds of the early church, read the entire Apocalypse allegorically. Augustine, perhaps the most influential theologian in Western Christianity, did not treat Revelation as a prophetic timetable. He saw it as a symbolic description of the ongoing struggle between the city of God and the city of man, a struggle that plays out in every generation, not a calendar of specific future events. The turn came in the 19th century. John Nelson Darby developed dispensationalism, the system that divides history into distinct periods, each governed by different divine principles. Cyrus Scofield popularized it through the Scofield Reference Bible, which became one of the most widely distributed study Bibles in the English-speaking world. From there, the approach spread rapidly. The Book of Revelation as a precise description of specific future events, to be read as literally as possible. So what many people today treat as eternal biblical truth about the 144,000 is actually the product of a roughly 200-year-old interpretive tradition. This does not make it wrong, but it places it in context. And context, as we have been seeing throughout this exploration, is everything. Even Luther and Calvin, the great reformers, read Revelation more allegorically than many of their modern followers realize. Luther actually questioned whether the book belonged in the biblical canon at all. Calvin is the only New Testament book for which he never wrote a commentary, not because he thought it unimportant, but because he was not confident about how to interpret it properly. This is worth knowing, not to undermine anyone's faith, but to recognize that the confidence with which certain positions are held today often rests on a foundation that is much younger and much narrower than its proponents acknowledge. Breathe. Now we need to address something that most sermons uncomfortably skip over: the question of virginity. The 14th chapter says of the 144,000 that they did not defile themselves with women, for they are virgins. For centuries, this sentence led people to conclude that these must be exclusively celibate men.
men who had never touched a woman, pure, unmarried, sexually untouched males. This interpretation was taken for granted for a long time, especially in church traditions where celibacy was considered a higher spiritual state. But there is a serious problem with this reading, a very serious problem that you cannot see without knowledge of Hebrew literary tradition. In the Hebrew Bible, sexual immorality is almost never used in its literal sexual sense when it describes the relationship between God and His people. It is a metaphor. Specifically, it is the metaphor for idolatry. The entire book of the prophet Hosea is built on this metaphor. God instructs Hosea to marry an unfaithful woman, but the story is not literally about sexual betrayal. It is the most dramatic metaphor available to the ancient literary imagination. God is like a betrayed husband whose wife, Israel, has run after other gods.
When Jeremiah uses the same image, he is not talking about sexual sin. He is talking about a people who have abandoned the God who made a covenant with them and have begun following other gods, other powers, other empires. In the 16th chapter of Ezekiel, Jerusalem appears as a woman who lets everyone in who knocks at the door. But this is not an erotic text. It is a devastating portrayal of political and religious unfaithfulness. If we take this background into account, and the first century readers did take it into account because they knew their own literature far better than we know it today, then the virgins in the 14th chapter are not celibate men. They are those who remained faithful, who did not bow before the imperial cult, who did not commit spiritual adultery with the religion of the empire, who did not enter into the compromise of serving God and Caesar at the same time. This is a matter of interpretation, but the original context of the text strongly supports this reading. Breathe. Let us now turn to the seal itself, because the mark placed on the forehead may be the deepest layer of this entire passage. In the 7th chapter of Revelation, the angel marks the servants of God on their foreheads. But this image does not originate in Revelation. Far from it. In the 9th chapter of the book of Ezekiel, written several centuries earlier, an almost identical scene takes place. God sends a man through the city of Jerusalem, a man with a writing kit at his side. The instruction is clear. Go through the city and put a mark on the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over all the detestable things that are done in it. Those who did not participate, those who did not assimilate, those who watched what was happening around them with grief in their hearts, but did not join in. After the marking is complete, the destroying angels come and strike down everyone who does not bear the mark. Everyone, old and young, male and female. But those who bear the mark are untouched. The mark is not a reward. It is not a prize. It does not say you are better than the others. It says you did not give up. The author of Revelation borrows this image deliberately, consciously. The seal, then, is not an entry ticket. It is not a membership card for an exclusive club. Based on the text, it is a mark of protection, and it is given to those who did not bow, who remained who they were under pressure. But the seal has an even deeper history in Scripture. It reaches back much further than Ezekiel. In the book of Exodus, when God sends the 10th plague against Egypt, the death of every firstborn, He instructs the Israelites to mark their doorposts with the blood of a lamb. The blood is the sign, the mark of distinction, not because those who applied it were morally superior,
but because they trusted that the mark would protect them. The angel of death passes over every door marked with blood. This is where the name Passover comes from. The blood is the seal, the distinguishing mark, not earned but applied in faith. Earlier still, in Genesis, when Cain kills his brother Abel and is driven out by God, the Lord places a mark on Cain, not as punishment, as protection, so that no one who found him would kill him. The mark here is also a seal, a sign of divine ownership, of divine attention that says, "This one is mine, whatever he has done, and no one has the right to destroy him." Throughout Scripture, the mark on the forehead carries a specific meaning. The forehead, in biblical symbolism, is the place of identity. What is written on your forehead defines who you are. The high priest of Israel wore a gold plate on his forehead inscribed with the words, "Holy to the Lord." This was not decoration, it was declaration. It said, "This man belongs to God." His identity is defined by that belonging. The 144,000 bear the name of the Father on their foreheads. This is not an ornament, it is an identity statement. You belong to this. You have staked your life on this. And the revelation draws a sharp contrast, because there is another mark in the book, the mark of the beast. In the 13th chapter, the beast forces everyone to receive a mark on the right hand or on the forehead. Without this mark, no one can buy or sell. This is the description of economic exclusion. The mark and the seal are opposites. One belongs to God, the other to the power. One is voluntary, the other is coerced. One protects, the other integrates into a system of control. The first century reader understood this parallel immediately. Participation in the imperial cult was the mark of the beast. Not literally, not as a physical brand or tattoo, but functionally. Those who participated could buy and sell, could trade, could prosper. Those who refused were pushed to the margins.
The seal was for those who chose the margins. This still operates today, in different forms, under different names. But the mechanism is the same. There are systems that reward conformity and punish independent thought. There are structures in which compromise is the price of admission and integrity is the cost of standing apart. The forms change, the pressure is the same, and the question the Revelation asks every generation is the same question it asked the first. Which mark are you willing to bear? In the first century, this meant refusing to offer incense at the emperor's statue. It meant losing your livelihood, being expelled from the trade guilds, being unable to buy or sell in the marketplace, watching your family go hungry, being reported by your neighbors, being imprisoned, being sent to the arena, dying in public for entertainment. The seal was for those who accepted all of this, not because they were heroes, not because they were superhumans, but because there was something inside them that they could not sell, an inner point beyond which they could not be pushed. And here is something that most analyses glide over, something that overturns the entire picture. Immediately after the list of the 144,000, in the same 7th chapter, John describes seeing a vast multitude that no one could count. From every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing in white robes with palm branches in their hands, crying out,
salvation belongs to our God. These two images come one right after the other. 144,000 sealed, and then immediately an uncountable multitude. As if the camera shifts, as if the same reality is being shown from two different angles. The question is, what is the relationship between them? If they are two separate groups, then there exists a narrow elite, the 144,000, and a broader mass, the privileged and the rest. This reading suggests that even with God, there is a first class and a second class. But there is another reading. Richard Bauckham, one of the most respected contemporary scholars of Revelation, whose work is taught at every major theological faculty in the world, argues that one of Revelation's most important literary techniques is the contrast between hearing and seeing. The visionary first hears something, then sees something, and the two do not always match, because seeing goes deeper than hearing. In the 5th chapter, John hears that the Lion of the tribe of Judah has triumphed, the mighty, strong, invincible ruler. Then he turns around, and what does he see? Not a lion, a lamb, wounded, slain, bleeding. The same reality expressed two different ways. The lion is the language of power. The lamb is the language of sacrifice. Christ is both at once. If we apply the same technique to the 7th chapter, John hears the 144,000, a military census of the tribes of Israel, like a roll call at a conscription, precise in number, organized, disciplined. Then he turns and sees an uncountable multitude from every nation, not standing as soldiers, but celebrating, with palm branches, in white robes. The same group, two perspectives. One is the image of the struggle, ordered, defined, limited in number, an army. The other is the image of the triumph, infinite, boundless, celebrating, a festival. One is the earthly reality. You fight, you suffer, you endure. The other is the heavenly reality. You are the same person, but on the other side of the struggle.
If this is true, it is profoundly thought-provoking, because then the 144,000 is not an exclusive number. It is the opposite. It is the most inclusive symbol imaginable. Think about what this means for how you read the entire book of Revelation. If the literary technique of hearing one thing and seeing another is built into the structure of the text, then the whole book must be read with this in mind. What sounds like judgment may look like mercy from another angle. What sounds like destruction may look like liberation from another perspective. What sounds like a limited number may look like an unlimited multitude when you turn around and see it with your own eyes. This does not mean that anything goes. It does not mean the text has no fixed meaning. It means the text is richer than any single reading can exhaust. It means that the ancient writer, under the inspiration of the Spirit, chose a form that would speak differently to different generations, not because the truth changes, but because different generations need to hear different facets of the same truth. The first-century Christian under Domitian's boot needed to hear that their suffering was not in vain, that their endurance was seen, that their names were written in the book. The 21st century listener lying in bed after a long day needs to hear something slightly different. Perhaps that the pressure to conform, the pressure to bow, the pressure to become someone you are not in exchange for comfort and acceptance is the same pressure
wearing different clothes but carrying the same weight. And both readings are true. Both are present in the text. Both are waiting for the reader who brings the right questions. Breathe. The white robes deserve attention. In the book of Revelation, white robes always signify victory, but not military victory, not the triumph of force. The victory of faithfulness. They are given to those who endured. The church in Sardis receives the same promise. The one who overcomes will be clothed in white. The victory here is not the defeat of an enemy. The victory is that you did not give up. There is something deeply comforting in this definition of victory. The world defines winning as defeating your opponent, accumulating more than your neighbor, climbing higher than the person next to you. The Revelation defines winning as not quitting, as remaining faithful when faithfulness costs you everything the world considers valuable, as still being yourself at the end of the ordeal, not harder, not more cynical, not more bitter, but still recognizably the person God made you to be, bearing scars but not broken by them. The palm branches are even more eloquent. In Jewish tradition, the palm branch is the symbol of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. This was the most joyful feast in the Jewish calendar. It celebrated the 40 years in the wilderness when Israel had no permanent home, no settled place, no security, only tents, only temporary shelters, only the daily provision of God. And it celebrated the end of that wandering, the arrival, the homecoming. When the great multitude celebrates with palm branches, the message is unmistakable. God is finally here. The suffering is over. The homelessness is over. The tent has become a permanent dwelling. We have come home. If you think about it, this is one of the most beautiful promises ever written. It does not say you will win, or become rich, or be successful. It says you will come home. You will be where you truly belong. You will no longer need to fight, to adapt, to survive. You are there. Home. The feeling of being home. Think about what that actually means. Not a building, not an address, a state, a condition of the soul. The place where you no longer have to pretend, where you no longer have to perform, where you are fully known and fully accepted, where the door is open and it is open for you, where you can exhale deeply, completely, and know that you do not have to hold your breath anymore. That is what the multitude is experiencing. That is what the palm branches mean. That is what the white robes signify. Not theological correctness, not doctrinal precision, not the right membership card, just arrival, just home, just the end of the long road and the beginning of rest. And the 21st chapter of Revelation carries this thought forward, describing the New Jerusalem, a city that needs no temple because God Himself is the temple, where there is no need for sun or moon because God Himself is the light, where there are no walls that exclude because the gates are never shut. Feel the contrast. The earthly Jerusalem was destroyed. The temple was torn down, the walls fell. But the New Jerusalem has no walls because there is nothing to defend
nothing to exclude, nothing to fear. The gates stand open in every direction at all times to all people. This is not a fortress, this is a home. And everyone who belongs there has already been sealed, already been marked, already been known. The 144,000 are the people of this promise. However you interpret the number, literally or symbolically, this is the context. Not an exclusive club, not a narrow elite, but those who have come home, those who are finally where they belong. Breathe. There is a detail in the 14th chapter that is rarely discussed, and yet it may be the most remarkable sentence in the entire description. The text says that the 144,000 sing a new song before the throne, and no one else can learn it. No one. Not because it is secret, not because it is complicated, but because this song can only be understood by those who have lived through something. Only those who have been there, who have passed through it, who carry the experience in their bones. Think about what this means. There is a knowledge that cannot be taught from a textbook, cannot be absorbed from a sermon, cannot be understood by reading about it. It can only be acquired by living through it. Only those who have been there understand. This is what modern psychology calls post-traumatic growth. When someone passes through a trial and emerges on the other side, not as the same person who entered. Something has changed, something that cannot be explained to anyone who has not experienced it. Not better exactly, not stronger exactly, different, deeper, richer, more wounded, but somehow more whole. The song of the 144,000 is like this. The knowledge that suffering gives and that cannot be obtained any other way. Not desirable knowledge, no one wants to pay the price for it, but once you have it, you are never the same again. There is a particular quality to this kind of knowledge. It is not intellectual. You cannot learn it from a lecture. It is not emotional exactly either. It is existential. It changes the way you inhabit the world. After you have been through something that nearly destroyed you and come out the other side still yourself, still standing, still capable of love, you know something that people who have not been through it cannot know. You know that you can survive, not in the abstract motivational poster sense, in the real sense. You know the exact shape of the darkness because you walked through it, and you know what was still there when the darkness cleared. The 144,000 carry this knowledge. It is their song. The melody was written in the key of suffering and resolved in the key of survival. And only those who lived through both movements can sing it. This is not elitism. It is experience, and the revelation honors it, gives it a name, gives it dignity, calls it a song that heaven itself pauses to hear. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian who stood against the Nazis and was executed in the final days of the war, his letters from prison radiate a depth that could never have been reached from the comfort of freedom. He did not become happy in prison. He became something else, something for which we do not have a good word. His faith did not grow simpler, it grew more honest. His prayers did not become louder, they became quieter. His theology did not become more rigid, it became more spacious. And the writings he left behind from that cell have nourished the faith of millions who have never spent a night in prison, because the truth he found there is transferable even if the experience is not. Corrie ten Boom, the Dutch woman who hid Jewish families during the occupation and was sent to a concentration camp for it. Her sister was killed beside her. She survived, and afterward she devoted her entire life to speaking about the kind of forgiveness that the camp had taught her. Not the kind of forgiveness you learn on a Sunday morning in church, the kind that suffering burns into your flesh, the kind that costs everything and gives back more than it takes. She once stood face to face with a former guard from the camp who had come to hear her speak and who extended his hand to her in greeting. And she had to choose. In that moment, with the memory of her sister's death still alive in her body, whether to take that hand. She took it, and she said afterward that she felt the warmth of forgiveness flow through her arm as though it came from somewhere outside herself. This is the song that no one else can learn, because no one else has stood in that particular place and made that particular choice. Viktor Frankl, the Viennese psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz and brought back one of humanity's deepest insights, that everything can be taken from a person except one thing: the freedom to choose how they respond to what happens to them. That thought, the last human freedom, is precisely what the seal is about. Not that you do not suffer, but that in your suffering you remain free. These people were not perfect. Bonhoeffer participated in the conspiracy against Hitler, which presented a moral dilemma for a pacifist theologian. Ten Boom struggled with bitterness for years. Frankl was not a saint. He was a human being, with wounds, with flaws, with doubts. But in each of them there was something that could not be sold, an inner point that was not negotiable. Perhaps the 144,000 are made up of such people. Not perfect people, not flawless people, not superhumans, but people in whom there is a point that cannot be surrendered, that pressure cannot break, that the empire cannot buy. Breathe. Now let us consider what this looks like in our own world, because it is easy to leave all of this at the level of ancient history or 20th century martyrs. But the text does not want to stay there. The text wants to be here, now, with you. The pressure today does not come with swords. It does not come with arenas. It does not come with concentration camps. The pressure today is much subtler, and perhaps for that very reason, much more dangerous. Because you do not see it, you do not feel it, you do not notice when you bow, when you say at work what is expected, not what you think, when you present on social media the face that will be accepted, not the one that is real, when you run on the treadmill of consumption because everyone is running, and you are afraid of what will happen if you stop. When you tell your children, study hard, get a degree, earn well, be successful, because that is how the world works, not because that is how it should work. These are small bows, multiple times a day, so natural that you do not notice them, but they accumulate. And one day you catch yourself not knowing who you are anymore. You have lost the inner point that was you. The system has bent you, and you did not even realize it. The ancient Romans had a genius for this kind of gradual absorption. Their system did not primarily rely on violence. Violence was reserved for the stubborn. For most people, the system worked through participation. You joined the guild. You attended the feast. You poured the wine. You said the words. And slowly, imperceptibly, the compromise became the norm. And the norm became your identity. And your identity became indistinguishable from the system that had absorbed you. By the time you realized what had happened, there was nothing left to resist with.
The modern versions of this process are subtler still. They do not ask you to pour wine for an emperor. They ask you to accept 1,000 small erosions of your integrity, each one so tiny that protesting any single one would seem ridiculous. But together, over time, they reshape you. They sand down the edges that made you distinct. They smooth out the convictions that made you uncomfortable to be around. They make you easy, agreeable, compliant. And when you look in the mirror, you see someone who looks like you, but feels like a stranger. The seal is for those who notice, who wake up one morning and say, "This far and no further." Not with a dramatic gesture, not in a heroic pose, quietly, internally, just this much. No, not this, not anymore. This is not easy. It never has been. In the first century, the price could be death. Today, the price is the loss of comfort, the loss of social acceptance, the loss of the feeling of security. The stakes are different, but the decision is the same. Do you bow, or do you remain standing? The book of Revelation does not promise that it will be easy. It does not promise that it will be painless. It does not promise that you will grow rich if you are faithful. What it promises is this: the seal protects, not from pain, from dissolution, from losing yourself, from being kneaded by pressure into a shapeless mass. The seal says, you are who you are, and you will remain so, whatever comes. And there is a sentence in the description of the 144,000 that may be the simplest and deepest summary of everything we have been exploring tonight. The text says, "In their mouths no lie was found." Not that they performed miracles, not that they knew everything, not that they were flawless, but that they did not lie. They spoke the truth, even when the truth had a price, even when a lie would have been more comfortable, even when the truth was equivalent to death. What if being chosen is just this? Not more, not less. Speaking the truth, remaining faithful, not lying. Not because you are a hero, but because you cannot do otherwise. Because the inner point in you, the sealed place, the part that belongs to God, will not allow you to pretend to be what you are not. Breathe. Now, after all of this, perhaps it is worth returning to the very first question, the one we started with. What if not every believer enters heaven? Based on the text, the answer is not that simple. The text does not say no, but it does not say yes either. What it says is more complex and more beautiful than either. It says there is a people. God knows them, every one of them. He marks them with a seal, not because they are excellent, because they are faithful. And this people, when the struggle is over, will not be 144,000. It will be a multitude that no one can count, from every nation, every tribe, every language, every people. The number is not a limit. The number is a promise, the promise of completeness, that no one will be left out who did not want to be left out, that no one will be lost who did not choose to be lost. There is a concept in modern biblical scholarship that illuminates this beautifully. Theologians call it the already and the not yet. It refers to the tension that runs through the entire New Testament, the sense that God's promises have been fulfilled
and have not yet been fulfilled at the same time. The kingdom of God has already come. Jesus said so directly. The kingdom of God is among you. But we are also still waiting for it. We are still told to pray, "Your kingdom come." It has arrived and it has not yet fully appeared. Both are true, simultaneously. Salvation has already been accomplished. The cross was real. The resurrection was real. The victory was won. And yet suffering continues. Injustice continues. Death continues. We are saved and we are still being saved. We are free and we are still fighting for our freedom. We are sealed and we are still in the battle. If we place the 144,000 inside this framework, a very human picture emerges. These are not angels, not superheroes, not spiritual giants. These are people who fear just as you fear, who struggle just as you struggle, who sometimes despair just as you sometimes despair. But there is something in them that will not let them give up, an inner compass that does not lose its north even under the heaviest pressure. Think about your own life for a moment. There has been a time when you knew what was right and chose the easier path instead. There has been a time when your inner voice said, "Do not do this," and you did it anyway, because everyone else was doing it and it seemed foolish to resist. There has been a time when you surrendered something that mattered to you simply because you were exhausted. If so, you are not alone. The entire history of humanity is about this. The first century Christians asked themselves the same questions, and the book of Revelation is their answer. Not a theological treatise, not an academic paper, a cry in the darkness, a hand reaching out and saying, "Do not give up. It means something. What you are enduring means something." The remnant. In ancient Hebrew thought, there was a concept the rabbis called the remnant. In every generation, when the whole nation goes astray, there is always a small group that does not. When everyone bows, there is always someone who stands. In the time of the prophet Elijah, when Elijah believed he was the only faithful person left in the entire nation, God said to him, "I have reserved for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal." 7,000 out of an entire nation, not many, but enough. Because the remnant is not the majority. The remnant is the seed from which everything grows again. Perhaps the 144,000 is such a remnant, not the privileged few, the seed from which the uncountable multitude grows, the army that becomes a celebrating crowd, the seed that becomes a tree. And if that is true, then the number is not a ceiling. It is a floor, not the maximum, but the beginning, not a closed door, but an open one. The seed is planted, and the harvest is beyond counting. But this, like everything in the book of Revelation, is a matter of interpretation. Yours. Breathe. Perhaps the 144,000 is not a number at all. Perhaps it is a question. Not whether you are on the list, but whether you are willing. Willing to not bow when it would be easier to bow. Willing to remain yourself when everyone around you is giving up who they are. Willing to be the person you know, in the deepest part of your heart, you are meant to be, even if it costs you something. The answer is not simple, but perhaps it should not be. The deepest texts of the Bible always leave something open,
not because they are not good enough to give an answer, but because the question itself is more important than any answer could be. This text has been read for 2,000 years. It has been debated for 2,000 years. It has been misused for 2,000 years. And it is still here, still provoking, still refusing to be tamed, still asking the question that no generation has been able to fully answer, because the question is not about a number. It is about the kind of person you choose to be when the pressure comes. And the pressure always comes. Every generation has its own version of the imperial cult. Every generation has its own system that demands participation in exchange for survival. Every generation has its own quiet compromises that accumulate until the soul has been reshaped without its owner's consent. And in every generation, there are those who find the line, who draw it, who stand on one side of it and say, "No further, this far and no further." These are the sealed ones, the marked ones, the ones whose foreheads bear a name that the world did not give them and the world cannot take away. John sat alone on that rocky island under the pressure of an empire. His friends were in prison or in the grave. The future was dark, and he wrote down what he saw, a number that has occupied humanity for 2,000 years.
Perhaps because the meaning is not to be found in the number itself, but in what the number conceals behind it. And what it conceals is this: there are people who do not give up. In every generation, in every empire, in every system that demands their souls, there are always those who find the line and draw it, who say no when it would be easier to say yes, who remain standing when the world is bowing, who sing a song that no one else can learn because no one else has been where they have been. You may be one of them, not because you are special, not because you are strong, but because somewhere inside you there is a point that has not yet been sold, a place the system has not yet reached, a small, quiet, stubborn flame that refuses to go out, even when everything around it is dark. That flame is the seal, and the God who placed it there has not forgotten where he put it. Tonight, as you rest, let that flame burn quietly inside you. You do not need to understand everything about the 144,000. You do not need to resolve the theological debates. You do not need to choose between the literal and the symbolic right now. You only need to know this: the God who seals his people has sealed you. The God who preserves his faithful has not lost track of yours. And the song that is being prepared for those who endure, the song that no one else can learn, is being composed even now from the notes of your own particular life. Every time you refused to compromise and it cost you something, a note was added to the song. Every time you told the truth when a lie would have been easier, another note. Every time you stayed faithful when faithfulness seemed pointless, another. The melody is being built, phrase by phrase, from the raw material of your ordinary, imperfect, struggling life. And one day, when the struggle is over and the multitude gathers in white robes with palm branches in their hands, that song will be heard for the first time in its fullness. And it will be your song, and it will be beautiful, not because you were perfect, but because you did not give up. Rest in that tonight. Let the number dissolve into what it really is, not a boundary, but an invitation, not a limit, but a promise, not a locked door, but an open one, standing wide, waiting for everyone who chooses to walk through. If this exploration meant something to you tonight,
If the mystery of the 144,000 opened a question in you that you want to keep exploring, then you understand why Sacred Psalms exists. This channel is dedicated to the deep places of Scripture, to the passages most people skim over, to the questions most sermons avoid. If that kind of depth matters to you, subscribe. It is the simplest way to make sure you do not miss what comes next. If you want to go deeper, consider joining the channel. Members receive access to extended meditations, exclusive content, and a community of people who take these ancient texts seriously enough to sit with them in the quiet. And if this video gave you something real, a new perspective, a deeper question, a moment of peace at the end of a complicated day, a super thanks is one of the most meaningful ways to say so. Thank you for being here tonight. And one last question for the comments. How do you read the 144,000? Literally or symbolically? Your answer matters because every honest reading adds to the conversation. And this particular conversation has been going on for 2,000 years and is nowhere near finished. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you. And may you rest tonight under the seal of the God who knows every name, every face, every struggle, and every quiet act of faithfulness that the world has never noticed, but that heaven has never forgotten. This is Sacred Psalms. Sleep well, and may the angels of heaven guard your rest. Amen.